Then moving ahead, we go to the next topic of your chapter, the reign of terror, the rule of Atankwad. And these years are 1793 to 1794. Children, as I told you, after King Louis XVI was executed, now it was taken up by the Jacobean club leader Maximilien Robespierre, and he followed a severe policy, a severe control and punishment. And he was very, very strict. In fact, he was worse than the kings. It is said 100 times worse than the kings. He got the clergy punished, he got the nobility punished, and even the people of his own party. And all his enemies, ex-nobles, clergy, members of the political party, who did not agree with his methods or his policies, were arrested, imprisoned, and they were tried and proved. If they were proved guilty in the court, they were all guillotined. Okay, guillotine is a machine where the heads are chopped off. You can see here, there is a machine where the heads are placed there, and then the top part just slides down and chops the head off. Okay, such a brutal death he would give them. And we'll look into some of his policies, but he followed his policies very harshly, that even his supporters asked him to become moderate in his approach, but none of them really liked him, and this is why it is called the year. Although he ruled only for a year, it's called the reign of terror. People were living in fright, in fear all the time. Children, let us look at some of the policies of Maximilian Robespierre. Okay, he got people executed or killed who were threats to him or who did not agree with him. He increased the wage salaries of people, but only to a limit, after which they could not be increased. Okay, and he also limited that one person could get only, suppose, 100 grams of meat and bread in a day. Nobody could buy more. Okay, so he fixed that amount which one person could buy. The farmers had to sell their harvest to the government at a fixed price. Okay, there's nothing more. Whatever the price was the government had fixed, they had to sell it accordingly. Then production of costly bread, which was made from nice fine flour, was stopped, and cheap kind of bread was launched. And now the people who earlier in France would address each other as Madame or Monsieur were not referred to as Sir or Madam anymore. Okay, they were addressed by the names. And he got all the churches closed down, and instead of those churches, he opened up offices there. Okay, so these were some of his policies. Okay, but people did not like him, and it is said that in 1794 he was arrested, and finally he was also guillotined. So guillotined, as it is quarantine, it is guillotine. You can see here, this is the machine where people were guillotined. So whatever, actually it is said, whatever you sow shall you reap. So this is what also happened to Maximilian Robespierre. Yes, he too was guillotined by his own people. Children, under the Jacobean regime, Maximilian had in 1794 abolished slavery. Now, we will look into is one of the good work that he has done was to abolish slavery. Now, the people of France were actually not willing to work in the colonies that the French held in the Caribbean islands. You can see, which supplied France with tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. Okay, and because they were not willing to go there, this created shortage of labor in these plantation areas. So that began the slave trade. What was the slave trade? Let's look into it. Now, France had three colonies in the Caribbean islands. You can see Saint Domingo, Martinique, and then Guadeloupe. These were the three colonies in the Caribbean islands from where France got coffee, indigo, sugar. Okay, children, as I told you, France got sugar, indigo, coffee from these Caribbean islands, and since the European laborers were not willing to go there and work, so that led to the slave trade. Now, and it was called as a triangular slave trade. Now, the French merchants sailed from their ports in their country. There were three ports, Bordeaux and Venice. From there, they would sail. Okay, you can say they would sail from France. They would reach Africa, African coast, where they would buy slaves from the local chieftains there, and then they would pack these slaves in the ships in horrible condition, and it would take 3 months to travel right from here across the Atlantic and reach the Caribbean islands. Okay, and there, here in this Caribbean islands, these slaves would be sold to these plantation owners. Okay, and then these ships would then return. What would these ships would empty the slaves there, and then they would pack these ships with sugar, indigo, coffee, and these ships would return back to France. Okay, so you can see this was a triangular slave trade. Here the picture shows that from France they would reach the African coast, where they would buy these slaves from the local chieftains. They would then carry them all the way to Caribbean, where they would leave them, and from there they would pick up tobacco, sugar, indigo, coffee, and carry them back to France. You can see here the ships are carrying all these things back to France. So that was the slave trade. Children, this triangular slave trade was carried on, and earlier even the National Assembly held long debates, but no law was passed because they feared that the opposition would come from the businessmen who earned huge profits and incomes on this slave trade. But it was only the Jacobean regime in 1794 that abolished slavery. So this was one of the good work done by Maximilian. Okay, but however, 10 years later, we see the King Napoleon Bonaparte. He reintroduced slavery.